Might be a bad idea to draw a swastika on my forehead for this one. TGIF Suicidalists, it is I, Brian White, a Cinema Suicides editor in grief, and I am coming to you with a head cold, so I sound kind of lame, lamer than usual. Before I get to this week's review, I want to draw attention to something that actually kind of dawned on me this week. I almost forgot about it, but this week, the 11th actually, marks the 6th anniversary of Cinema Suicide. I've been doing this for 6 years, and only for the last couple of months has it been this deal on YouTube. But this week, we're going to mark that with a look at the recent Severin Films Blu-ray release of the sort of long-running urban legend Jim Van Bebber directed The Manson Family. But first, holy shit, you guys, the hotness. It seems like it was about 10 years ago when a couple of teasers came down for a Dutch Nazi zombie movie called Worst Case Scenario. It was from a director named Richard Raphorst. And we all waited with bated breath for more details on this movie to come down. Literally waited for years for details on a movie that couldn't seem to make it past the pre-production phase. And then eventually Raphorst would come around and announce that the movie was DOA, it was not going to be made, and we all went fucking insane because this looked like some next level shit. The monster makeup in those teasers was extremely inventive and extremely disgusting. And this was at a point when zombie movies had not invaded the cultural consciousness to such a point that we were just so sick of zombie movies. I mean, is anybody honestly waiting and excited for World War Z? Are you actually excited for World War Z at this point? But anyways, recently a teaser came down featuring some overcranked, grainy black and white footage of Nazi soldiers digging up dead bodies in a cemetery and loading them onto the beds of trucks. And in the end, it's announced that this is a movie called Frankenstein's Army, and it's directed by a man named Richard Raphorst. Fucking awesome. Now, even though Frankenstein's Army appears on the surface to be just another siege/survivor movie, which pits members of the Soviet Red Army during World War II against a mob of biomechanical horrors, the makeup and the monster designs are out-fucking-standing in this trailer. And you can bet that as soon as I've seen it, I'm going to come back here and tell you all about it. And now, before we move on, I also want to direct your attention to a trailer that I saw, thank you, IO9, for a trailer for a documentary called Spook Central. I don't know if this is a real movie that's coming out or if it's somewhat of a faux trailer for a movie that's not actually a real movie. It seems to be a riff on the recent Shining documentary, Room 237, which puts Stanley Kubrick's movie through the critical and analytical ringer. Spook Central seems to take a bunch of people who give great significance to even the most minor details of what I consider to be one of the greatest movies of the 80s, Ghostbusters. Now, I don't know much about this movie beyond what I saw in the trailer. I'm showing it to you because I thought it was funny. If you happen to know anything more about it, put it in the comments. You would have to be living under a rock since 1969 to claim ignorance of Charles Manson and the family. But I'll lay it out for you anyways. It is the late 60s, and a bunch of hippies have taken up residence at Spawn's Movie Ranch on the edge of Los Angeles County. Now, at first, all they do is get high and have lots and lots and lots of sex. But this lifestyle of drugs and sex and manipulation at the hands of a charismatic cult leader eventually leads them to a life of crime that ends in murder. Now, when Bobby Beausoleil goes down for murder, the others raid a couple of houses at random and kill the people inside in order to give the police the impression that the murderer is still at large and they've got the wrong guy. However, these being a bunch of burnt-out hippies living under the thrall of a cult leader, they're not all that smart, and it takes no time at all for this plan to kind of come down around them. Jim Van Bebber made a movie out of this, The Manson Family. The Manson Family is a bit of a cult film urban legend for a bunch of reasons. And I feel like I need to give a quick dissertation on Jim Van Bebber if I'm going to talk about this movie, because the man who made the movie is just as important as the movie itself. Jim Van Bebber is among the last of the renegade filmmakers. See, before the internet and the declining cost of filmmaking enabled anybody with even the slightest interest in making a movie, there was a class of directors out there living out on the fringes, producing movies on their own uncompromising terms and then releasing them to the public as if they didn't give a fuck about anything. They were maniacs with an unrivaled passion to make entertaining movies about extremely unsavory topics. They were anarchists and libertarians with low-grade sound and camera equipment, and they sought to kick your fucking face in with movies that sprung from the darkest corners of the human imagination. The problem, for Jim Van Bebber at least, is that Jim's movies are highly representative of his actual lifestyle. Jim's always been haunted by drug addiction and alcoholism, and what appears to be antisocial personality disorder. And money is also hard to come by when you're Jim Van Bebber. Jail time also tends to cut into production budgets, and he also seems to associate with a bunch of other maniacal individuals who aren't helping matters. So Jim makes this movie, and it takes him like 10 years to finish it, and then like even longer to release it. In the intervening time, various cuts of the movie play around at film festivals, cuts of it make it to VHS tape trading circles. It's been around, but this latest release from Severin Films on Blu-ray is probably the last chapter in the saga, and that kind of makes me a bit sad. However, this release is probably the final chapter and gives a wider audience than the DVD release that was put out back in 2003 by Dark Sky Films. Now, the narrative is hardly there. This is a very stream of consciousness picture. And even though the bulk of the movie is a sort of biographical rundown of the Manson murders, there's also this weird wraparound story about like a TV true crime documentary production and some weirdos who, I don't know, they provide a videotape full of sort of interview materials about the Manson murders. It's really unclear what's going on in these scenes that involve people in weird masks who are naked, sharpening weapons and shooting heroin. But it sort of suggests some of the transformations that this movie has undergone in the years since it started production. Stylistically, the Manson Family is gritty and grimy and truly nasty to behold. It is a chaotic picture that leaps wildly between the then and now. It presents itself as a documentary, even though that it isn't, and this may be the picture's greatest stroke of genius, because Van Bebber took like 10 years to make this movie. His cast visibly ages over time, and he uses this to his advantage. Van Bebber himself plays Bobby, and in the footage taking place in the 60s, he appears youthful, and then in the prison interview footage, which is supposed to take place in 1996, Bobby Beausoleil has visibly aged without the aid of makeup. It really works. He does this with Tex Watson and Sadie Atkins and Patty Krenwinkel and Leslie Van Houten. It loses points, however, for trying to shoehorn this weird story about the TV show production and these weirdo teenagers. It's really unclear what Van Bebber's trying to say with this footage. Is he trying to convince us of the enduring influence of Charles Manson? Are we being condemned for trying to find some kind of entertainment value in these murders? Was he short on time and needed padding? It's just not clear, and we'll probably never know. It's also plagued by some really lousy performances by actresses that Jim sort of insists on using again and again and again in his movies, and they're so terrible. But it's balanced out by an utterly insane, awesome performance by Marcelo Gaines as Charles Manson. If you have ever seen interviews with Charles Manson, Gaines plays this character to absolute pitch perfection. It's like he lives this guy. Van Bebber himself also turns in a great performance as Bobby Beausoleil, and Mark Pittman also wins points for being Tex Watson. He's outstanding in this picture, even though he doesn't even look like Tex Watson. I have to wonder, however, about the sort of enduring power of Charles Manson. He was sort of iconic of this sort of nihilistic 80s and 90s counterculture. But now in these days, so far removed from the 60s, and the hippie wave, has the power of Charles Manson been sort of lost to time? I mean, when's the last time anybody actually thought about Charles Manson? This is a chaotic picture with a lot going on in it, and when all is said and done, this is the movie that will go down as Jim Van Bebber's magnum opus. This is the movie that we will all point back to when somebody says, yo, where should I start with Jim Van Bebber? It is the real deal from top to bottom, and that makes it a rare gem in the movie world. You see, there are plenty of movies out there that are vicious and violent and psychedelic, but this one combines it all into a single package with a madness to it that feels genuinely harmful. It's significant. It has weight to it. The Manson Family is an all-out attack on the senses. So there you go. Violent, fractured filmmaking from a truly dangerous filmmaker. Like the Synapse DVD of Deadbeat at Dawn that was released like years and years ago, this latest Blu-ray from Severin Films comes positively packed with extras. You get a documentary about the 1997 Fantasia Film Fest. You get a documentary about the making of the movie. You get a director's commentary track with Jim Van Bebber, which is extremely entertaining. You also get a good look at his latest short film, Gator Green. The movie is bound to be divisive among modern horror fans, but fans with a discriminating taste are going to be floored by what they find here. It is a truly dangerous and vital movie, and for that, it should be cherished. As always, like, comment, and subscribe, and I want to know down there in the comments what you thought of the Manson Family. Also, tell me what I should review next. Now, right here is where I would usually leave you with a quote from another movie, but today I leave you with this. So help me God, Vic Noto, if you spam my fucking comments, I will find you and make you pay.